tell me briefly, insofar as the Borden family is concerned, to place them in the community. First, your dad, your father was president of the bank, is that right?
Yes.
And he was a serious man, was he not? He wasn't a man that went about glad-handing people or drinking beers in bars with people and the like. Didn't ever run for mayor of Fall River or school committee or any such thing?
I'm afraid that in the eyes of most of my fellow citizens of Fall River, we were not the most sociable family.
So the Bordens generally, without taking anything away from the worth and the respect that your family deserved, was not necessarily a family that everybody liked and would be very affable and convivial. Is that fair to say?
That's true. Even when I became a member of the church, and some of my friends suggested that I be more involved. Some people in the church thought I was being haughty or unfriendly.
And back to the house. The house did indeed have a dozen rooms in it, plenty of rooms to play when you were a child.
You know how much room there is in the house.
Plenty of rooms, perhaps to play hide and seek when you were a child, your sister, friends.
I can honestly say that Emma was my friend and my best friend. She was my little mother. She was the person who cared for me more than anyone else.
And if someone had a heinous intent to do something terrible and to come into the house and prey violence upon your stepmother and father, is it fair to say that they have more than ample number of places to put themselves so that they would not be noticed for a long period of time?
Well, that's true in the sense that, for the most part, we tend to keep our doors shut. If it's very, very warm, I might open mine, but I frequently would keep it closed if I didn't want to listen to conversation that might be going on in another part of the house.
And Ms. Borden, I am finished with my question, but the prosecutor gets to ask you some more questions before this jury is to go.
Thank you, Mr. Borden. And who's going to do the cross-examination? Mr. Borden.
Borden, you're an educated person.
And I went to school.
Yeah, how far did you go in school?
I went to high school.
Right. You can read and write?
Yes, certainly.
You understand the question?
Yes.
You understand every question that's been asked of you today?
Yes, sir.
You understood all the questions that were asked of you back in August 7, 8, and 9 of 1892?
Judging of the rules.
Is that correct?
I understood the words, and I answered to the very best of my ability.
And at that time, you knew you were sworn to tell the truth. Is that correct?
And I did tell the truth to the best of my knowledge.
As you are here, you are
Yes.
asked questions under oath, correct?
Yes, sir.
And at that time, you were asked some questions, and this is on the first day of the inquest, with regard to where you were when your father came in. And you testified on those occasions you were standing at the top of the stairs. Isn't that true?
As far as I recall, I was sitting in the kitchen and I was reading an old magazine, an old Harper's Weekly.
It's not what you recall, ma'am. Isn't that what you testified to on 2 occasions at the inquest under oath?
I know I went upstairs at one point because I took out my clean laundry and I had to sew a little piece of band lace on one of my garments.
So
And then I came downstairs, and as far as I know, that's where I was.
question to you, as an educated person, is do you recall testifying twice at the inquest that when your father came home, you were at the top of the stairs?
You say that I said that. I don't recall. I recall, the best that I can recall is the fact that I was in the kitchen reading the magazine.
testify to that under oath at the inquest, correct?
Sir, I don't know what I testified. I barely knew who I was talking to.
Another question. Let's move on to the floor. Another area. She's answering the questions by sir.
And you testified when you were testifying under oath. This was 3 or 4 days after the incident, the death, terrible death of Mr. Borden, your father, and your stepmother, correct? And your memory was sharper then than it is now, isn't that correct?
I don't know if it was sharper than.
Well, you've now had, this is now June, this is nearly a year afterwards, and you say you have a better memory now, 9 months down the line, than you had then?
I believe I was quite clouded at that point. I was in shock and most frightened. It was such a puzzle to me as to where and how this whole horrible thing could have happened.
Just wait for another question, please. Go ahead, Mr. Borden.
Ms. Borden, you were here when your sister Emma testified, and there was an incident about 5 years before the murder of your father and your stepmother with regard to his giving some property to your stepmother's sister. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that is true.
And that did cause a rift between you and your stepmother and your father. Isn't that true?
Well, I wouldn't call it a rift exactly. I merely said to Father at the time that I thought that he should remember to treat his own children as well.
And it was after that time that you started calling Abby Borden the mother. Isn't that correct?
That is true.
So fair to say, there was a downturn on your relationship with your parents, correct?
Well, I never thought of her as my mother, actually.
Wasn't there some resentment?
That she was my stepmother?
Yes.
Well, certainly I missed my own mother that I had never known.
You testified with regard to the fact you were outside of the house, you were getting some, would you say, leads?
Yes.
And what are the leads for?
For sinkers.
Sinkers for fishing,
For
correct?
fishing,
And
yes.
yet at that time, you didn't have fishing line, you didn't have any hooks, isn't that correct?
That is true.
And
And I was going downtown to purchase those, but I thought perhaps if I could find some lead, I could save some money.
But you could buy the leads downtown, too, isn't it?
But not if I didn't need them.
You didn't find any leads, did you?
No, just a small chip.
And you say, and you've testified before, that you were up in the barn for about 20 minutes, is that correct?
That is true.
And you've testified that you were up to the second floor of the barn, isn't that correct?
That is true.
Now, once again, you're an educated person. You have some education.
Yes.
Do you understand that heat rises?
Yes, sir.
And it was the hottest place to be that hot day was on the second floor of the barn.
It was
Isn't that
very
true?
close.
You never came downstairs and didn't eat those pears in the house where it would be cooler, did you?
No, sir. I did have one pair earlier on in the house.
Will you be testifying under direct from your counsel that what you're telling today is what you believe to be true? Isn't that true? Isn't that accurate?
I'm telling the truth as I know it, sir.
But you testified earlier, it's what you believe.
I'm telling the truth as I know it, sir.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Borden. Thank you, Ms. Borden. Sit down now. Defense rests.
Defense rests, Your Honor.